Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now here's your host, Roxanne Derhodge.
Hi, everyone. It's Roxanne Derhodge of Authentic Living with Roxanne. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Today I have a special guest, Matthew Ferry. Hi, Matthew. How are you?
Hello, Roxanne. Glad to be here.
So Matthew and I have been trying to get together to do this podcast for a while, and we're finally able to line up everybody's schedule to do that.
Whoop, whoop.
So Matthew brings, I'm going to say, a wealth of knowledge and space that speaks to the authentic living perspective. And I'll read a little bit about Matthew, and then we'll just jump into it and have a great conversation. He is a spiritual teacher, a songwriter, and a best-selling author. And for the last 26 years, he's coached thousands of top performers in the Achieve Enlightenment Prosperity. His books, videos, audios, songs, and meditations and seminars all utilize his street-tested methodology called the Rapid Enlightenment Process. Well, I want to know about that. And he's also the author of Quiet Mind, Epic Life, an Amazon self-help and spiritual bestseller in the US, Canada, Australia, and Japan. Matthew and his family live in Southern California. I much prefer to be there today than in Niagara Falls, Canada.
Yes, well, it is. I'm up in the mountains right now, so it's a little cold and different temperature. But yeah, down in my beach area, it's much nicer.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So did you go to school to kind of take the path that you've taken in your career? Give me your story about what got you, in this space.
It started with having these really strange experiences when I was a kid, about 9 years old, where I felt like I was leaving my body and I didn't understand what it was. But I was experiencing such incredible bliss and peace that every time I went back into my body, I would, burst into tears of dread. And it took me on this path. As a teen, I was looking for that state in all the wrong places: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And then I synced up with my father. My father is actually a longtime legendary self-help leader in the real estate agency space. And in my work with him, he began to turn me on to all of his mentors. And it was that process by which dealing with and trying to understand how do you get a person to perform that I was actually able to begin to understand, how do I get myself to perform? How do I get back to that bliss state? How do I get to that peace and that flow that was so palpable for me when I was young? And it took many decades, but here we are today. I have over the years developed a methodology, and like you read in my bio, it's street tested, meaning I didn't go to school. I didn't study. I didn't do any of that. I actually was working with tens of thousands of people in either one-on-one sessions or group sessions, working to see if I could get them to begin to do what they say they wanted to do, which turns out you could either do that because you're angry that life is the way it is, or you can do that because you're inspired by what you want to do, more of an authentic path. And I gravitated towards that authenticity. Ultimately, I developed something called the Rapid Enlightenment Process, which is a process by which over a very short period of time, your mind goes quiet and you have profound revelations of the oneness that we all are.
Amazing. So your dad is Tom Ferry?
That's my brother. My dad is Mike Ferry, actually. My brother.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you, this is so fun because I was looking at your name and I kept saying, is it Tom Ferry's and Mike Ferry? And I kept getting stuck and like, it's not Matthew. So I sold real estate.
Nice.
When I was right out of university, first job. I don't know about the choice, but anyway. And your dad's trainings back then were
Of
the
course.
that's
You
amazing.
bet.
That.
Well, you can imagine if you're the son of the real estate sales training guru, he literally just kept feeding us books, audios, seminars, consultants. I mean, we never stopped. And ultimately, for me, in about 1999, I started to realize there's something else going on with me.
Hmm.
I'm not jiving with this idea of make money just to make money or be successful just to be successful. I started to have these experiences where I was like, well, what do I think that the money and the success is going to give me? I think it's going to give me more peace and flow and options and
Hmm.
prosperity. And I just was pulled to why not have that experience now? And that really led me on a much more of a spiritual path.
Compared to the sales training world, which is nothing. Obviously, people need to be connected into why they're doing what
Oh
they're
yeah.
doing. But on a, it's interesting because I, went to school for psychology, went into sales, grew up in a sales family, and then I went back to grad school, and then I shifted out of sales, and then it ended up in doing, obviously frontline work, and then ended up kind of in a combination of business and again now the authenticity. So is it not interesting how that path kind of leads you
Yep.
regardless of your background?
Yeah, I find that people like you and I are, we can't escape our own propensity to do inner work and discover the way to experience the most satisfaction possible in our lives. And that's unique. What I find is that when I try to speak to someone about externalized satisfaction, optimizing the environment, and making a lot of money, it always leads me back to, and you'll be there and your life will still suck because you'll suck on the inside. So now we're in trouble.
So I'm curious, let's go back to that 9-year old because I'm going to say, that 9-year old had something figured out that I think most children, and I don't know if you would agree with this, Matthew, come into it with that space. And what happens is not, life kind of knocks it out of them, and then they either go into a situation where they have to kind of have that conversation with themselves about where am I going, and they either go left or right. So let's talk about that 9-year old and what he was experiencing, like you said, where you drop back into your body and you said, I don't like this.
You had
What
to
is
go to bed.
mindfulness? Yeah.
Well, I think that that particular 9-year old, this, I mean, it's very accidental, right? I wasn't intentionally trying to do anything. But I would be reading books. I had asthma at the time, and my mom would make me these little makeshift asthma tents underneath the kitchen table. And so it was like blankets, a little bed underneath, the humidifier, a light, and a book, right? And that combination of things, the hum of the humidifier, would just put me into these trance-like states. I'm recalling now, right? I don't actually know, but these trance-like states where all of a sudden I'd be looking at the book, and next thing you know, the book was 100 feet below me, and so was my body and the table, and
Oh.
I'd go into these incredible, um, you know, existential states. And I think the thing for me was at that time, I I really recognized that the rules that we all follow are not real,
Mm.
and that the rules themselves were limiters. And now I was 9, right? What do you do about it? Nothing. And who can you tell? No one. But it really guided me. And the people who follow my work call themselves spiritual hooligans. And we're
Mm.
spiritual hooligans because we look at the playing field of life, and we look for those rules that actually limit our self-expression and limit our creativity and limit our chutzpah and limit our joy. And we intentionally break those rules. We're basically being hooligans.
Mhm.
And I think that the inspiration at 9 helped me to see that. Ultimately, I would say if I had to sum up what I was experiencing at that time, I sum it up in my book, and I just say that enlightenment is the recognition that the source of life for you is the source of life for everyone and everything,
Mhm.
that we're all one thing, expressing itself with infinite variety.
Mhm.
And when you connect with that idea, so you just automatically like, and you're more free. It's really, really powerful.
Right, because, and this is like something that I know I've experienced over and over again, like in kind of the path that I took. I grew up in Trinidad. It was a very connected, small community, and it was all about that stuff. But as life goes, like you said, you kind of, you go into the systems, and I went into the, private school systems, academics, all those things. And so, you found the lane. You either found the lane or you're in trouble, right? And so I found the lane quite early, and then kind of started to do things rote. But at some point, in your lives, because I always go with adversity, comes that reality that you got to do something. And, about 10 years ago was when I stopped, and started to reflect on things about why am I doing what I'm doing?
Thank
Even though
you.
I was, yeah, even though I was in psychotherapy and those things, but there was other things in my life where eventually I started to develop a practice of slowing down the things that I was teaching. I eventually started to listen to lots of things that allowed me to really come back into that space, like you talk about, to really, what is my imprint going to be like when I am no longer, and how am I going to use the gifts that I've been given, to help those around me. And that's kind of when I made a huge shift in my life.
Yeah, for me, it began with this idea that there was talking in my head that didn't care about me. And I call that talking the drunk monkey. And that was, probably when I was 20 years old or so. I started to have this awakening to that my mind is not my friend. It doesn't care about me, doesn't like me most of the time. It's incredibly judgmental. And it took me the better part of a decade to really get a handle on the functionality. Like, what is the mind doing exactly?
Mhm.
That then led to a breakthrough. I started following a teacher named Dr. David Hawkins, who wrote a book called Power versus Force. And I was working on his muscle testing methodology. It was a methodology based on applied kinesiology, and he was tracking the levels of consciousness. So he was a psychotherapist who became obsessed with this muscle testing phenomenon and how it overlaid with psychology and states of being. For me, though, while that was interesting, what was far more interesting to me was that certain phrases or words or ideas strengthen the body, and certain phrases, words, or ideas weaken the body. And I began to draw a conclusion that the phrases that strengthen your body typically imply that all is well,
Mhm.
that life is good. And the phrases that weaken the body typically implied some kind of survival state, and they weakened the body, and then they caused the mind to talk. So that if you began to optimize your life towards this set of what I would call enlightened perspectives, perspectives that imply that all is well and strengthen the body, then suddenly your mind would go quiet, because your mind talks when a threat is present, which
Mhm.
is shocking for most people, because they're like, my mind is always talking. And I say, I know a threat is always present, even though you're living a life where pretty much what's going to kill you is what you eat and stressing out.
Right, fight, flight, or freeze. And most people live in that state, Matthew. And unfortunately, they're not aware, you know, that they're in that state. And the opposite of that, and it's gonna sound very woo-woo, but it's a lot. If you really believe that, we are infinite energy and we are one, and we are all really that space of love, you're shifting. It's kind of like, that Japanese researcher that used the water. I don't know the actual name of it. Have you ever seen?
Yes, of course. Yeah. The
And that,
messages in water.
yeah, and and then you'd be like, am I seeing these things, or is it really happening, right? That the power of words, and like you're saying, like when, this particular, is it David Hawkins, you
Yeah.
said?
David Hawkins.
Yeah. And that the reality is that you can impact the strengthened parts of your body versus, or you can talk to water, and it can turn,
Yeah.
horribly, into decrepit things. And then you can say fantastic things to water, and you get these phenomenal fractals of things that get created. And you're like, how is this possible?
Well, you might consider the ideas of syntropy and entropy. So, syntropy is going to be that creative force that is driving us towards greater states of complexity, efficiency, empowerment. And then entropy, of course, is the destructive force, which is degrading everything back to its base state. And certain ideas, though unprovable, are strengthening. So, for example, the idea that I am an infinite being, while it might be woo-woo, it certainly is unprovable. It is not, it's conjecture. But what you'll find is my life ends when I die is also, you have no idea. You don't know either, right? You don't know either one. But the arrogant drunk monkey in our head pretends like it's the ruler of the universe, and that it knows what is right and wrong and good and bad, and it doesn't. They're all estimates. And so the method that I've developed contains within it, one of the components is this idea of let's just put them to the test. If I can't prove it, does it at least strengthen me? Because if it strengthens me, then I go into a more free state because I'm empowered. If it weakens me, then I go into a threat state, and now I am disempowered. And so for me, it was understanding the drunk monkey in my head. Then I began to figure out, well, what are these enlightened perspectives that imply that all is well? Then in that process, I began to discern that there's a collection of modes of motivation for thinking that get the drunk monkey to talk. And I call these things the hidden motives to survive. And the hidden motives: greed, grudge, hatred, victim, illogical rules, humble, traitor, pride, greed, resistance, lazy. These motivations are in all of us. And when one of them is present, the mind talks. When one of them is present, it implies that something is wrong and that you need to change something. It implies that you are in some way threatened, and it weakens the system. So that's part of the method. You got to be able to see the drunk monkey. You have to be able to see the hidden motives. You begin to connect with these enlightened perspectives. And then the last thing is a pretty typical thing that we all do in our psychological process, which would be to recontextualize. So you take the context of the situation, you turn it on its ear, and you find the way to experience it in a more strengthened, empowered fashion. So recontextualization is the skill of describing the conditions and circumstances of your life in a way that creates an empowering reality for you. It's kind of like, if you're going to make things up, you might as well make things up to feel good.
Why not pick the good versus the bad, right? Like, I mean,
you're making it up anyway.
So is that the process that, tell us, is that the kind of the description of the process that you've developed?
Yes, that would be the Rapid Enlightenment Process.
Okay.
And the Rapid Enlightenment Process very, very quickly gets people into a more peaceful, quiet state. And then they experience all the things that you like to talk about: the creativity, the chutzpah, the resourcefulness, the authenticity, the bravery, the courage. All of that stuff just happens naturally when you transcend the illusion that you need to fit in or look good or be right or be smart or be a part of the group, when you realize that none of those things are even important anymore.
When you've seen what we've gone through in the last little while with the state that the world is in, what do you think has happened to the world around the uncertainty with the pandemic? Tell me with your coaching and your speaking, what have you been experiencing based on what you just told me about this process?
100% of the clients that we've been working with in our Ignite Mastermind, specifically, that's the way that we work with people. 100% of the people that we've been working with have experienced an acceleration during this breakdown, and the reason being is that breakdown is the beginning of breakthrough. That the world itself is actually on track for an extraordinary leap in our consciousness, our kindness, our unity, our oneness. And what always precedes that in evolution is the fight back from the old.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see the virus, of course, is one thing, but the virus is really just one component of the shenanigans that are going on in the world. And what you see is a bunch of old people who are fighting for separateness and protectionism, and they should do that. And then you have a bunch of young people who are like, this is BS, and they're just waiting for the old people to die off, or they're waiting for them to, move over. But we're seeing this tidal wave all around the world of people like you and I and our listener waking up and saying, oh, wow, I thought we were already on track for kindness and unity and oneness and love and cooperation. Turns out we aren't. I need to wake up and maybe do something about it.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
you see the advertising and the grassroots movements to really increase the amount of unity and world level cooperation that are springing up. And of course, they're being massively opposed. And the virus is just what a phenomenal spark to bring this to light. So do we want the virus? Do we want people to die? No, of course not. But breakdown is the beginning of breakthrough. They're the same thing. They're just a different place on the timeline.
Absolutely.
The breakthrough's coming.
Absolutely. So for people listening, right, like leaders and, the average person that's just listening and going, oh, okay, Matthew. Okay. So like, what do I do now? I've struggled with you call it the drunken monkey, right?
Yeah.
In my head.
Yeah. Mine's the wrong pronunciation. The drunk monkey back then. I didn't do well in English.
What do you tell them to do? Like, because, a lot of people, I have had people experience exactly what you're saying, and they're enlightened, and they're, making connections at so much of a more profound level, and they're rethinking their values and their alignment. And then there's other people that are, drinking more and getting in more destructive situations, all those things, right?
Those are also good situations to be in because they're leading to something.
Yeah.
But if we are talking to the person who's in a destructive state, step one is embrace it. Embrace the destruction, embrace your down cycle, and just admit we all go up and down. We all have up cycles and down cycles. And if you're experiencing that right now, don't resist. Just be in it. Be fully in it. Drink as much as you can. Be completely out of control and embrace the negativity, because what you'll find is the fastest way to positivity is to embrace negativity. So, and then deal with your worst case scenario. These are coming from in my free app that our listener could download. That is just my name, Matthew Ferry. I give them a 23-day little daily practice, little bites that they can take on for 23 straight days. And one of those daily practices is to actually accept the worst case scenario. Because what I find is that negativity is the way to positivity. And that if you just try and be positive on top of the negativity, it's like slathering a mud pie over ice cream over a mud pie. You still got a mud pie. And you're like a rose garden with a sewer underneath. I mean, you look beautiful from far away. You're all positive. But when people get up close, they can really smell the seething cesspool. So you deal with the worst case scenario that you're probably avoiding, that is bringing resistance and negativity to you. You actually address it. You make a plan for it. You decide, if the absolute worst, horrific, most nightmarish thing happens to me, this is what I'm going to do. A, B, C, D, and E. You don't try to avoid it. You actually say, this is my plan if it happens. Because typically there's something opposing underneath. You have something that you're avoiding, and that's driving this destruction. But once you do that, once you face the worst case scenario, what you'll find is it's like it just lets off some of the steam, and you go into a much more peaceful state, which then opens up your creativity. And next thing you know, you're like, well, wait a second, do I really want to go to that worst case? No. And suddenly you have some authentic creative moves that you can make.
Absolutely. So going, instead of resisting, just sit with it, and, make it exponential in sometimes, and that's an externalizing therapy technique you're talking about to some degree, right? Like make it worse, sit there, and then when you realize, another thing that sometimes is used is you have people flip a coin. It's that simple, right? And you say, on the days that you get heads, you're going to have a great day. On the days that you have tails, you're going to have a horrible day. Guess what happens? People come back and they go, having the horrible days, or it's too much work. I prefer the better days, right? So it's interesting, talking about that scenario, because intuitively, I think if you're able to sit in that space, you come to a different recognition of what you're experiencing. But like you said, most people, they're hovering and they're not looking below to see what's perpetuating things that need to be shifted.
And I suspect that your listener is more geared towards looking internal and trying to discover what's going on with them. And I think for the average person, there's just so much complexity in what we get told to do. And what I've always tried to do is just make it as simple as you possibly can. I mean, you went to all my father's trainings as a real estate agent, or listened to them. And I was trained to simplify everything. And my goal was to simplify the speed at which one could get to peace, thus the rapid enlightenment process.
It sounds amazing. Now I'm going to have to try it, because it sounds
Well,
amazing.
I'm gonna send you a book. So after we get done with this, I'll get your address and send you one.
Fantastic. So this has been a pleasure, Matthew. What I want people to know is that change is possible, right? And we all, every single day that we open our eyes, we have the ability to make a transformation. And things may seem difficult, but it becomes incremental, or you can do it quickly, or you can kind of sit at it. You just have to decide, what am I going to do? Today's a new day. I'm going to make a difference. So Matthew, again, tell them where they can get this download, and for anywhere that people that are looking that might want to work with you, or have you speak, that they can connect with you.
You just go to MatthewFerry.com. There's a button that you can press, or a link for the app. If you want to get the app directly, you can just go MatthewFerry.com/app, and love to be in your life and help you go through this process of getting into a joyous, peaceful, authentic place.
Thanks so much again for your time. So everybody, go out and get the app, because it sounds quite fascinating. And if you're wanting more information on authenticity at home or at work, reach out to me at roxannedurhage.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannedurhage.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.